Welcome back. Thanks for staying with us. You're watching WION The World. I'm Jyotsna Kumar, and this is World DNA. Let's begin with the headlines. U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio arrives in India on his first official visit beginning in Kolkata. He is scheduled to visit sites associated with Mother Teresa before traveling to New Delhi for talks with PM Modi later in the day. U.S. media reports say the United States is considering new military strikes on Iran, though no final decision has been made yet. Reports comes as Trump announces he would stay in Washington instead of attending his son's wedding.
They're never going to have a nuclear weapon. And we'll have that over with soon. It'll be over with soon. And
Donald Trump says at a rally in New York that the conflict with Iran would be over with soon and claims the U.S. stopped Iran from obtaining a nuclear weapon. Tulsi Gabbard resigns as U.S. intelligence chief, ending a tenure marked by reported tensions with Trump over Iran conflict. Trump says she has done an incredible job and notes she is stepping down to support her husband during cancer treatment. Tens of thousands of residents in California ordered to evacuate after a large chemical tank begins leaking, raising fears of explosion. Tank contains about 7,000 gallons of methyl methacrylate, a flammable chemical used in plastic production. U.S. Marines conduct a live fire exercise near Mount Fuji in Japan using mobile HIMARS rocket systems. Short drill shows rapid rocket strikes and quick repositioning tactics. The exercise is intended to reassure Pacific allies. Bolivian riot police clash with anti-government protesters in La Paz for the second time in a week as unions and indigenous groups press their calls for President Rodrigo Paz to step down. SpaceX's Starship completes its 12th test flight, splashing down in the Indian Ocean after a controlled descent of both stages. The spacecraft performs key maneuvers, including a flip for landing control and deploying 22 mock satellites. Fuel prices have been hiked again in India, with petrol rising by 87 paise and diesel by 91 paise per liter. This marks the third increase in just 10 days, as state-run oil companies continue to adjust rates in response to rising global crude oil prices. Now, amid the stalemate in the war in West Asia, U.S. media reports say Washington is weighing new military strikes on Iran. And the reports come just hours after U.S. President Donald Trump skipped his son's wedding, saying that it was important for him to remain in Washington. And amid these reports, U.S. President Donald Trump has reiterated that the war with Iran will be over soon. Speaking during an election campaign rally in New York, Trump said that Iran will never have a nuclear weapon. The issue of nuclear weapons is among the key sticking points of Iran-U.S. negotiations.
they said, why? I said, because Iran is going to have a nuclear weapon if we don't stop them. And I said, we're going to have to do it. And we have stopped them. They're not going to ever have a nuclear weapon. They're never going to have a nuclear weapon. And we'll have that over with soon. It'll be over with soon. And
Amid these developments, Pakistan's Army Chief Asim Munir arrived in Tehran, where he was welcomed by Iran's Interior Minister Iskandar Momeni and Pakistan's Mohsin Naqvi. The Pakistani military described Munir's visit as part of ongoing mediation efforts. However, Iran's Foreign Ministry spokesperson Ismail Baqi has cautioned that the visit did not mean that the two sides have reached a turning point or decisive situation. And furthermore, Iranian media quoted Baqi as saying that disagreements between Iran and the U.S. were so deep and extensive that it is not certain that a deal can be reached within a few weeks or months. Baqi has also added that the key issues, including ending the war on all fronts and naval blockade in the Strait of Hormuz, are still under discussion. Separately, U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio has said that there has been some progress in talks, but cautioned that Washington was not there yet. And speaking to reporters after a NATO ministers' meeting in Sweden, Rubio emphasized that more work needs to be done.
Yeah, I said the same thing. I can't believe I said the same thing that the Iranians did. There's been some progress. I wouldn't exaggerate it. I wouldn't diminish it. There's more work to be done, but look, yeah, there's been some, and that's a good sign. I'm glad they said that. We're not there yet. I hope we get there. The president would prefer to do a good deal.
Furthermore, Rubio warned that while President Trump prefers a negotiated diplomatic solution, he has expressed concern that perhaps a deal is not possible. Rubio added that if things did not change, then Trump has other options on the table.
We're not there yet, and hopefully that'll change. It may not. Honestly, it may not. We're dealing with a very difficult group of people. And if it doesn't change, then the president's been clear he has other options. He prefers the negotiated option and having a good deal, but he himself has expressed, concern that maybe that's not possible. But we're going to keep trying. I know our guys are still working on that very hard, so.
Now, furthermore, European Union nations have moved towards sanctions on Iranian officials for the continued blockade of the Strait of Hormuz. While the EU has not named any individual or entities who will be targeted by the new sanctions, the move is being seen as a step towards expanding the scope of its current sanctions on Iran. In other development, one of the world's largest defense shows, the Royal International Air Tattoo, has been cancelled due to the Iran war, and the defense show was scheduled for July 17th to 19th in the UK. And want to discuss more on this, we're now being joined on the broadcast by Asha Castleberry, U.S. national security and foreign policy expert. She's joining us from Washington, D.C. Thank you so much for joining us on the broadcast. I quickly begin with, of course, the U.S. media reports that say the United States is now considering new military strikes on Iran, though there's no final decision that has been made yet. And we've seen Trump, even not attending his son's wedding, and we've seen visuals of his motorcade rushing back to Washington, D.C. Do you think there's a possibility of resumption of strikes at this point?
I think it's definitely on the table for two reasons. One is, I must say that looking at the internal political developments that just recently happened, where Congress was very close to passing a war resolution act or a war powers resolution, that definitely stood out more in terms of what has happened recently with regards to making it through Congress. And then also we have to take into account the gas prices. The pain at the pump keeps going up, and more and more Americans are becoming more frustrated about it, especially as we are enduring a national affordability crisis. And then as far as the Strait of Hormuz, I mean, it's like a stalemate. Yes, we have a U.S. blockade, but there's still some significant critical threat levels for the United States. There has been some cargo ships that have been able to navigate through the Strait of Hormuz, but it's still at a significant low rate. And then we're still seeing that very little contributions from the international community. So I think all these different factors is what's pressuring President Trump to consider a more defense approach moving forward.
And if that happens, what kind of effect would that actually pose for Trump? Because at this point in time, we've seen Iran has been retaliating. And if you look at the comments from the Iranian media, and of course, who has now quoted Baqi, was said that, it is not certain that a deal can be reached within few weeks or months. This is a timeline at least has been given from this spokesperson of Foreign Ministry of Iran. How long do you think can Trump, and I'm not talking talking about how U.S. militarily, but how long can Trump go on with the strikes, considering the fact that, of course, on the home front, there is some sort of course, pressure when it comes to midterm elections. How is Trump looking at this? And he's confident. Is he confident about going and finishing at one, with these strikes?
Well, he's very confident in strikes because he looks at it as an old school approach where if I continue these strikes, I will be able to pressure Iran to completely give up its nuclear weapons program, also open up the Strait of Hormuz. So in his commander-in-chief mindset, he thinks that that's what's going to help achieve his desired outcomes. But what we're watching here is that, yes, defense or the defensive approach may give you the short-term desired outcome, but in the long run, it's diplomacy that resolves these issues. And we're going to learn that from here, and that it's going to take a while for the United States and Iran to reach an agreement on how does this look moving forward. Now, there's been a lot of tit for tat between the United States and Iran with, Pakistan as the mediator, and it's very similar in terms of its approach as far as it's taking quite some time. It's not a short win, which has been expressed in the national security strategy that this administration is really into short wins. This has turned out like it turned out before, where this is quite prolonged. And I think that's what's really disappointing President Trump, because he wants a short win and he's not getting that compared to what he ended up getting with Venezuela.
You also talked about the nuclear weapon. Trump has also claimed that the U.S. has stopped Iran from obtaining a nuclear weapon. It's interesting because we don't see any deal yet, and Iran never really claimed on building a nuclear weapon. What we know is that there was talks about uranium enrichment. So what do you make of these statements coming from Trump?
Well, it reminds me of the need, again, for the international community. When the international community was part of the JCPOA, it was able to really get to the nuts and bolts as far as looking at the enrichment uranium levels, getting the parties to agree to not be able to expand or go beyond this level. And if so, it would snap back its economic sanctions. Well, we don't have the international community really involved in as far as negotiations. So I think what he's learning is that through a unilateral approach, it's harder to negotiate. You're dealing with more of a hardliner leadership, and also without the international community, it's just tougher to reach to certain agreements, especially over the nuclear weapons program.
Also, talking about the international community, we've seen that EU is now thinking of putting sanctions on, we don't know the entities yet, but they are, of course, looking forward for these sanctions on, considering the fact, keeping in mind the Strait of Hormuz. Do you think that would in any way strain Iran, or would that affect Iran when it comes to EU sanctions?
Well, slapping additional sanctions or individual sanctions may play a part because of the fact that economically there is some pressure that's happening within Iran. But I still feel that culturally, they can endure pain and be able to still play this war game with the United States. So just adding on more pressure, it's just may end up making them more enduring when it comes to engage the United States. We could prolong this because they know if the United States continues this ongoing war, it's hurting Americans, especially economically. Again, like I said, the pain at the pump. So a prolonged engagement with the United States is one of their desired outcomes, and it also impacts their alliances within the Gulf region. The Gulf region does not want the United States to continue military strikes in Iran, which was expressed not too long ago, because of the fact that the retaliation ends up in the Gulf at a good portion of time. So we will see moving forward, but I think what Iran is doing is calculating all the costs and just making sure they grow it out over time so that it can be a pressure point to the United States.
And talking of Iran, has said that it's reviewing a new U.S. peace proposal, but officials have been saying that major disagreements still remain unresolved. Do you assess Iran doing enough to make concessions for U.S. to agree on a deal yet?
No, I do not. As far as them, reaching certain concessions, but they also too are feeling the pain when it comes to, being more prolonged with this war. And once again, I do believe diplomacy will resolve this war. However, with regards to concessions, I mean, there's been some tit for tat in terms of planning of peace proposals, but unfortunately, they have not been able to reach a certain agreement, especially with the specifics involving the nuclear weapons program and the Strait of Hormuz. So we will see moving forward how that happens. But I think what we need right now in order to expedite this ending this war is that we need more of the international community involved. I see that Marco Rubio is now in Europe. He needs to solicit more support from the Europeans, and then on his way to India. What can India do to help too as well? As the Secretary of State, he needs the international community involved as far as helping to de-escalate it, help to negotiate the international issues, and also helping to address the global energy chain too as well.
True.
Supply chain.
Right. Well, considering the fact that, their talks are going on, of course, there's always some sort of positivity we can hope for. But thank you so much for joining us on the broadcast and giving your perspective on it. Appreciate it.
You're welcome.
Now, after NATO talks in Sweden, U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio has arrived in India for a high-level diplomatic visit. His visit comes at a sensitive time in the U.S.-India ties, with talks expected on trade, energy, defense, and strategic cooperation. And as part of his India visit, U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio has landed in West Bengal's capital, Kolkata. Rubio was received by U.S. Ambassador Sergio Gore during his first visit to the state. The Kolkata leg of his tour comes at a politically significant time for West Bengal, which won assembly elections for the first time. Rubio is visiting Mother Teresa's Missionaries of Charity and is expected to pay respects at Mother Teresa's cemetery and visit the iconic Victoria Memorial. The city holds a special significance as home to the world's oldest U.S. consulate, established in 1792, which continues to manage American diplomatic and trade interests across 11 eastern and northeastern states. Later today, the U.S. Secretary of State will travel to New Delhi, where he is scheduled to call on Prime Minister Narendra Modi. Now, tomorrow, he will hold talks with External Affairs Minister S. Jaishankar and attend Independence Day celebrations at the U.S. Embassy on Monday. Marco Rubio will visit Agra and Jaipur before returning to the capital for the Quad Foreign Ministers meeting on Tuesday. Now, the meeting hosted by India will also see participation from Australian Foreign Minister Penny Wong and Japanese Foreign Minister Toshimitsu Motegi, alongside India External Affairs Minister S. Jaishankar. Ahead of his visit, Rubio had said that U.S. is ready to sell India as much energy as it is willing to buy. He has described India as a great ally and partner. Rubio's remarks are part of a broader effort by Washington to reassure India at a time when both sides are trying to manage new strategic and political differences. Rubio said Washington is ready to supply New Delhi with oil, gas, and other energy resources, and the only limit is how much India is willing to purchase. India is already one of the top importers of American liquefied natural gas, but the U.S. wants to go further. Last year, the Trump administration imposed a 50% import tariff on India, including penalties linked to India's purchase of Russian oil under U.S. sanctions. Now, the tariff rate was to be brought down to 18% under a tentative trade deal announced in February before the U.S. Supreme Court scrapped the tariffs. The tariffs and U.S. President Donald Trump's perceived closeness to Pakistan have caused a strain in India-U.S. ties. Now it will be up to Marco Rubio to undo the damage. For more on the story, our correspondent Ayan Koshal has sent us a report from Kolkata. Let's listen in.
Amongst tightest possible security, US Secretary of State Marco Rubio has arrived in Kolkata. In his India tour, he will visit the iconic Mother Teresa House and Nirmal Hriday in Kolkata. He might visit Victoria Memorial and then return back to New Delhi, where an informal meeting with Prime Minister Mr. Narendra Modi to be taken on. Tomorrow, Sunday, most important bilateral meeting between K. Jaishankar and Marco Rubio is to be taken place. This meeting indicates the crisis of fuel in India, and United States willingly want to sell India as much fuel as they need. Monday, Marco Rubio is to visit Pink City Jaipur and the iconic Taj Mahal of Agra. This visit is very important bilaterally because from the year 2025 latter half, the relation between India and United States are at stake as there are so many stern decisions taken by US President Donald Trump. Now is the iceberg is now in a melting situation is to be decided tomorrow in a very important bilateral meeting tomorrow in New Delhi. With cameraman Arindam, this is Ayan from Kolkata.
All right, shifting our focus, at least 10 people have been killed in Israel's fresh airstrikes in Lebanon. And according to Lebanon's health ministry, those killed in the airstrikes included 6 rescuers and a child. Israeli airstrikes were also reported in the southern Lebanese town of Nabatheh. Large plumes of smoke billowed from the region after the strikes as rescuers rushed to the site of damage. Israel also carried out a double-tap strike on paramedics who were inspecting bodies from an earlier Israeli strike. A footage of the attack shows paramedics standing beside bodies on the ground. A flash is seen and a loud explosion follows. The same men are seen lying on the ground. Now, blasts were also heard in and around the southern Lebanese city of Tyre, where the Israeli military has issued evacuation warning. And according to reports, one explosion struck a building on the outskirts of the city, while another was reported shortly afterwards inside the city. Despite a U.S. brokered ceasefire since April 17th, Israel has continued its launch strikes on Lebanon. And according to the Lebanese health ministry, Israeli attacks have killed at least 3,111 people since the beginning of the wider regional war. Now, Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan has ordered the closure of a top independent university in the middle of an academic year, and this comes amid an ongoing criminal investigation into its owners. And according to an official decree, the operating license of Istanbul's Bilgi University has been revoked, allegedly due to its liberal leanings. And the university, which has over 20,000 students from Turkey and abroad, including renowned researchers, was closed with immediate effect. Now, the order cites a legal provision permitting the closure of a private institution if the quote-unquote expected standard of education and training is deemed insufficient. Now, Turkey's Council of Higher Education say that it would take necessary measures to ensure students at the Social Sciences University due for June exams are not affected. However, it did not clarify whether they would be shifted to other institutions or how they would complete their academic year. The university had been run by a court-appointed administrator since last year, and this is following a money laundering and tax fraud probe involving its parent company. Now, founded in 1996, Bilgi is known for its liberal politics. It takes part in the EU's Erasmus exchange program, hosting students from across Europe and other countries annually. All right, with that, we call a wrap to World in Air for today. Before we wrap up here of the bulletin, here's a quick look at the images drawing our attention across the world. We leave you with that. News and updates will follow on the other side. You're watching Beyond World this one. Do stay tuned.
Lights, camera, and artificial intelligence. Know all about the changing landscape of filmmaking. Take a look at the legacy of James Bond. And know what Colombian pop star Shakira is up to. All this and much more with me, Diksha Bisla, on Beyond at These Times.
A humanoid in a Buddhist temple, lasers weeding out fields, FPV pilots bringing down drones, and systems keeping digital payments safe. It's a brave new world. The machines, us, and AI. All this and more coming up on this episode of Tech It Out at These Times.
From the bustling trading floors of Wall Street to the vibrant exchanges of Asian stock markets, WION breaks it down for you to make sense of what's happening. As we reveal the key factors behind events, strategic battles, and the game-changing business decisions that shape the world. We bring you all of this and more on World Business Watch. Where darkness hides behind every corner. Where the truth is stranger than fiction. A show that dives deep into the stories which shock and mystify. Unsolved murders. Psychopaths who defy explanation. International war crimes. And millions swindled in financial fraud.